I am still amazed that Berrien County history is still uncovered 225 miles away and 160 years later. Such was the case when a few months ago I received a call from Susan Young of Snellville, Georgia. Susan mentioned that she had been going through some of her late grandmother's possessions in an old wooden box. Aren't they always? Therein she came across a number of historical documents issued to a Franklin Ray of Berrien County. One was a Berrien County teacher's certificate made out to Franklin Ray, dated November 7, 1871, signed by James F. Goodman, County School Commissioner. The other document was a commission signed by Governor Rufus B. Bullock, granting Franklin Ray full power and authority to perform the duties of the office of Berrien County Receiver of Tax Returns, dated February 1, 1871. Susan said she thought that Franklin Ray may have been part of her family some generations back, as several others in the family had Ray as one of their given names, and he may have been a soldier, since several other documents and letters mentioned his involvement in the Civil War. She concluded our conversation by saying that since these documents related to Berrien County, and since we had a museum and archive to house them in, she asked if we would like her to donate the documents for perpetual keeping. I answered yes, trying not to show my excitement. That phone call and the numerous documents and letters I received from Susan Young sent me back 160 years to find out who Franklin Ray was, where he lived, and how he came about being elected the Berrien County Tax Receiver in 1871. I pulled out my copy of the Berrien County Elected Officials 1856 to 2008 that was compiled by Skeeter Parker. I thumbed through the headings: Ordinary, Sheriff, Coroner, Surveyor, Tax Commissioner, Tax Collector, then there it was, Tax Receiver. I scrolled down: Money, Lastinger, Parrish, Griffin, Williams, Wilson, then Franklin Ray. But he was commissioned February 16, 1864, serving a term of 1864 to 1866. The war was not over until April 1865. So what was the fate of this Confederate soldier that brought him home from the war before its conclusion, and what circumstances extended this saga a century and a half from Berrien County to Snellville, Georgia? The first lead in my search came from Jonathan Bryan, a part-time museum volunteer from Cook County. Jonathan indicated that the Daughters of the Confederacy organization, led by Gail Whitehurst Hughes of Cook County Historical Society, had actually installed and dedicated a Confederate headstone for Private Franklin Ray in April of 2008 at the Woodlawn Cemetery near the Lime Sink Church in Adel. On that marker, it states that Franklin Ray was a private in Company I of the 50th Georgia Infantry, commonly known as the Berrien Light Infantry, since the company's ranks consisted mostly of Berrien County volunteers. Private James Franklin Ray, Jr. was born in 1836 in Barnwell, South Carolina, son of James Franklin Ray, Sr. and his wife Lavina. Sometime shortly before 1850, the family moved to Irwin County, where the senior Ray was a school teacher. In May 1858, in Berrien County, Franklin Ray, 22, married Sarah Ann Lovett, 19, daughter of Joshua and Elizabeth Lovett. The couple set up house on a small farm in the Connell Mill District. In the 1860 census, Franklin and Sarah had 1-year-old daughter Mary Ann and Franklin's sister Martha Ann living with them. In March 1862, over a year after Georgia seceded from the Union and a month before war was declared, Franklin Ray went to Nashville with the intent of joining Company I of the 50th Regiment of Georgia Volunteers. However, he was still in Berrien County in July of 1862, when he and Sarah had just started their second child, John Hardy. For whatever reason, he was not enlisted in March, but was enlisted on August 25th in Calhoun, Georgia, though still assigned to Company I. The main body of the 50th Georgia Regiment had trained in Fort Davis at Guyton, Georgia, and had been assigned the protection of Savannah. However, on July 17, 1862, the regiment was transferred to Richmond, Virginia, in General Drayton's brigade under Stonewall Jackson. On August 28th, the regiment was engaged in the Second Battle of Manassas. However, it is unlikely that Private Ray had joined the company by that time. However, by September 14th, when the Battle of South Mountain occurred, Private Ray was most likely a participant. Drayton's brigade was engaged at Fox's Gap, where the Confederates were greatly outnumbered and found themselves struggling to keep from being surrounded and captured. The regiment lost 3 men and 3 others were wounded, including Company I's First Lieutenant Daniel D. Gaskins. 3 days later, on September 17, 1862, Georgia 50th was engaged again in the Battle of Antietam, where the Confederates were assigned to defend the Burnside Bridge. The regiment received a Union artillery assault with 29 killed and 97 wounded. Almost 3 months passed before the regiment was engaged again in one of the largest and longest battles of the war. The First Battle of Fredericksburg lasted from December 11th to December 18th. It involved 78,500 Confederate soldiers and 122,000 Union troops. The cost of that engagement was 400 Confederates killed, 3,700 wounded. The Union suffered 1,300 killed and 9,600 wounded, and 1,770 missing or captured. Private Ray fought under the command of General Paul J. Sims, but lived to fight another day. It was almost 5 months before Company I was engaged again in the Battle of Chancellorsville at a location just 4 miles west of Fredericksburg, referred to as the Battle of Salem Church. It took place over 2 days, on the 3rd and 4th of May, 1863. On the very first day of the engagement, 27-year-old Private Ray was gravely wounded. Captain David P. Luke later testified in Sarah Ann's application for a widow's pension that he was standing just behind Private Ray when Ray was shot by a Union minie-ball. There was only one remedy for most minie-ball wounds that shatter the bone: amputation. His arm was removed just below the shoulder, most likely by a surgeon at a field hospital, then transported by wagon to Hospital 26 on Church Hill in Richmond, Virginia, about 60 miles away. Hospital 26 was one of several hundred buildings that were used for hospitals during the war. Originally built as a Masonic lodge in 1859, it was converted to a hospital in September 1862 and was discontinued as a hospital in July 1863. Hospital 26 was a small two-story brick building only housing 40 beds, 7 employees, and 1 surgeon in charge, Dr. John No. The building remains today, serving as a duplex apartment house. 9 days later, on May 12th, as Private Ray was reclining in bed, still reflecting on his pain and misfortune, Mrs. Julia Trainum, herself having just lost a child and was serving as an aide in the hospital, offered to pen a letter for Franklin to his wife Sarah Ann back in Georgia. He accepted her offer. My dear wife, I know you are very anxious to hear from me since the recent great victory which has crowned our arms with success, and I am anxious to let you hear from me. I am very seriously wounded, having lost my right arm. It was amputated at the shoulder. And oh, how'd I like to have my dear wife and little ones around me at this time, but perhaps it is for the best. I will try to resign myself to the will of the Lord, and I hope I will soon be able to see you. Try to be cheerful and bear it the best you can. A lady by the name of Mrs. Julia A. Trainum offered to write for me, and I accepted the offer, as I was so anxious to let you know how I was and also where I was. I am now at the hospital on Church Hill called Mason's Lodge. I am treated very well where I am, and I think I'm improving. Write to me as soon as you get this. I am so anxious to hear from you and the children, and I hope I will soon be able to come home, for I cannot fight any more. Give my respects to Father and Mother. Tell them I should like to see them very much. Well, I must stop now, and I hope soon to see you. May the Lord bless you and my dear little ones, and may we soon meet again, is the prayer of your devoted husband, Franklin Ray. On June 2, 1863, almost 1 month after Private Ray incurred his tragic wound, he was issued a soldier's furlough for 60 days to return to his home in Ava, Berrien County, via Valdosta in Lowndes County. This destination suggests that Private Ray returned home by way of train. At this time in the war, railroads in the South were still under the control of the Confederacy. If he did travel by train, his itinerary likely followed this route: from Richmond, Virginia to Goldsboro, North Carolina, then to Wilmington, North Carolina, to Florence, South Carolina, to Charleston, South Carolina, to Savannah, Georgia, to Blackshear, and finally to Troopville, known as Valdosta, Georgia. Ava Post Office was listed as his home. However, Ava Post Office was located west of Adel, which had no post office at that time. Most likely, Sarah Ann had moved over to her parents' home in land lot 327, about 3 miles east of Adel, while Franklin was in the service, and he continued his recuperation there through the end of 1863. In January 1864, Franklin Ray offered his candidacy for the office of tax receiver of Berrien County and was elected. The office tax receiver in 1864 is known today as the tax assessor. In the 1860s and 1870s, each property owner provided the tax receiver a list of all of the property and other taxable assets he owned and stated what he felt the equitable tax would be on the property. The tax receiver would evaluate the owner's report and accept it or state what he felt it should be. If a property owner failed to provide an accurate accounting of all of his property, the tax receiver was authorized to double the taxes due. Franklin did receive letters from the fellow soldiers of his company on occasion, telling him of those who had been killed or wounded and the current condition of the war effort from a soldier's perspective. In one of those letters, Private G.E. Clayton made a request of his former comrade in arms. Friend Ray, I have a request of you. It is in respect to my taxes. I do not know what any of my property was valued in 1860, and I request you to value it in the proportion as the county in general does, if it is agreeable to you. I have no agent but my wife, and she knows nothing about tax matters, but you can assist her to place a value upon the articles. I will be satisfied at what you decide upon, as I know you will do me justice. Franklin was still an enlisted soldier, but no longer able to fight. But he was not sure if he should ask for a discharge from his military service or be retired from his service. This letter from one of his friends back at the front finally put it into perspective for him. It is better to be retired than to be discharged. If you are retired, you will draw continuation for ration $1.25 per day. Continuation for clothing about $100 per year, and as pay as a private, which is now $18 per month, all of which will amount to over $750 a year, and you remain at home. There is none being discharged now, as all are being retired who are disabled for field service. One final letter at the conclusion of the war was a poignant reminder of the futility of the war. It was Private Franklin Ray's oath of allegiance to the United States. This was required of all members of the Confederate States of America in order for them to be able to vote again. I, Franklin Ray, of Berrien County, State of Georgia, do solemnly swear or affirm in presence of Almighty God that I will henceforth faithfully support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Union of the States thereunder, and that I will in like manner abide by and faithfully support all land and proclamations which have been made during the existing rebellion with reference to the emancipation of slaves, so help me God. The oath was penned by J.F. Kendall, First Lieutenant of Infantry of Volunteers, Provost Marshal, and signed by Franklin Ray with his X mark. He was not able to write with his left hand. Franklin Ray was able to fulfill his duties as tax receiver from February 16, 1864 until March 8, 1866. Most likely he had a scribe to help provide any written correspondence required in the performance of his duties, because his wife could neither read nor write, and his oldest daughter was 11 and could read but not write either. Whether this was a large hindrance to him or not may not be known, but he either decided not to run for a re-election in 1866 or was defeated in the election. John E. Connell Jr. was tax receiver from March 8, 1866 to February 1871. However, Franklin was re-elected to the office in 1871. This commission, assigned to Franklin Ray, for the office of tax receiver, was issued on the 1st of February, 1871. It was one of the documents that Susan Young had gifted to the Berrien County Historical Museum and Archive. It is the oldest document of any Berrien County elected office holder that the archive has in its collection. It is signed by Georgia Governor Rufus B. Bullock. The 1870 census shows Franklin Ray, age 34, as a farmer with real property valued at $500 and personal property valued at $717. It did not say that Franklin was unable to write, so perhaps by 1870 he had achieved some ability to write left-handed. He and Sarah Ann, age 31, were living in District 1145 with their 5 children: Mary A., 11, John H., 7, Nancy M., 5, Elizabeth, 3, and James F., 9 months old. Sarah's sister, Anna Lovett, age 27, was working in the home as a domestic servant. With the limitations of one arm and a young family with little farm labor help, Franklin decided to pursue the teaching profession, probably at the McPherson Academy in Nashville. On November 7, 1871, Franklin Ray received a teaching certificate for the period of 2 years. This certificate is the earliest known teacher certificate in existence in Berrien County. How long he was able to teach and what schools is not known. Less than 4 years later, in 1875, Franklin Ray suddenly passed away of unknown causes. He was only 39. Sarah was left a widow with now 6 children, with the birth of Lillian A. in 1873. On November 13, 1880, Sarah Ray married Daniel J. Summerlin. However, she gave birth to a male child named William H. Ray in May of 1880. Certainly he was not the son of Franklin, and may or may not have been the son of Summerlin. Either way, by 1900, the children of Franklin and Sarah Ann had made new lives separate from their mother. The trail of our saga now follows the life of Franklin Ray's 3rd child, Nancy Missouri Ray. Nancy married Robert Jefferson on May 18, 1890, in Berrien County. Nancy was 25, Robert was 51, 26 years her senior, and had been married previously with a 7-year-old son, Benjamin T. Nancy and Robert Jefferson are the great-grandparents of Susan Jefferson Young of Snellville, Georgia. By 1900, the couple had greatly expanded their family with a daughter, Millie B., 7, and 3 more sons, Sally D., 5, Lonnie B., 4, and Eddie R., 2. Robert, age 61, was working in the turpentine industry as a distiller. They were living in a rented home on a farm near Adel. On October 22, 1909, Robert fell while driving his cattle home. A girl picking cotton found him and medical help was sought, but a blood vessel had burst and he lived only a few hours. He was buried in the Crossroad Church Cemetery in Massey. He was 71 years old. In 1910, widow Nancy Jefferson was still living near Adel, striving to make a living sharecropping on a farm. She did have the older children who were listed as farm laborers, but had 2 smaller children that were born since the 1900 census, Bernie, age 9, and Mally, age 6. Eddie Ray, who is the grandfather of Susan Young of Snellville, is age 11 and one of the farm laborers. That same year, Nancy's brother, John Hardy Ray, was also living in the Adel area, along with his wife and 8 children. Also listed as head of the house was Sarah Ann Ray, widow of Franklin Ray. She is not listed as a Summerlin, and no mention of him can be found. She stated that she was a mother of 8 children, 6 of which were still living. In September of 1910, on the occasion of Sarah Ann Ray's 72nd birthday, her children and their spouses and her grandchildren gathered about her for one more grand celebration. Sarah Ann is the lady in the dark dress on the left-hand side of the table. In 1910, the Georgia State Legislature created a pension act for Civil War widows. Sarah Ann Ray applied for the pension in November 1911. Therein, she states that she owned 95 acres of land valued at $1,000. She listed her income as being $35 a year from renting of her land. Note that her application was signed with her X mark, as she never learned to write her name in her lifetime. There may have been some difficulty in her qualifications for a widow's pension due to her remarriage to Summerlin. If the application was approved, it did not take effect until 1912 and would have only amounted to $25 a year. In either case, her pension would have been short-lived, as Sarah Ann Lovett Ray, wife of Private Franklin Ray, passed away on October 6, 1913. She was laid to rest in the Crossroad Church Cemetery in Massey. In September of 1913, widow Nancy Jefferson married widower John R. Register of Cecil, Georgia. Register had just lost his wife in May of that year, and William, his youngest of 6 children, was still living at home. But by the time World War I broke out, all but Nancy's 3 youngest children were married or had joined the war effort. Tragically, in 1918, Register's son, Private Lorton Register, was killed and his remains were buried in France. In the 1920 census, John and Nancy Register are living alone southeast of Cecil on the Valdell Road. Neither John nor Nancy are able to read or write. Nancy's son, Eddie Ray Jefferson, age 22, is not enumerated in the 1920 census, but he must have visited frequently because his future wife, Johnny Dell Marshall, age 14, only lives 3 farms away. In 1922, Eddie Ray and Johnny Dell were married. Johnny Dell was 16, Eddie Ray was 24. By 1930, the couple were sharecropping a farm in the Crossland district of Colquitt County. They had started their family with 3 children, Earl R., 6, Elizabeth P., 4, and Joyce Faye, 2. Faye is the mother of Susan Young of Snellville. Interestingly, Johnny Dell was enumerated as Louise J., which suggests that her given name was Deloise. By 1935, the Jefferson family had moved to Lowndes County on the Clyattville Road. The 1940 census shows the couple renting a farm at $4 a month. The family had grown in age and in numbers. Earl Ray was 16, Pauline 13, Joyce 11, and another daughter, Virginia, was 9. The census shows that Eddie Ray had a 5th grade education, and Johnny Dell stopped true schooling in the 9th grade. With the outbreak of World War II, Earl Ray Jefferson entered the service in the U.S. Coast Guard. The Jefferson children took the opportunity to have this group photo taken. Left to right, Faye, Earl, Pauline, and Virginia. Pauline married in 1942, Earl in 1945, Virginia in 49, and Faye in 1951. Faye is the mother of Susan Young of Snellville. By 1950, the children have all left home, and Eddie Ray is now working in his own business as a painting contractor. The couple are living in their home on Lakeland Highway east of Valdosta. He now prefers to be called Ray Eddie, and Louise has settled on Johnny Dell. Over the next decade or so, Eddie Ray and Johnny Dell had purchased a home in the Dasher Lake Park area on Highway 41. They operated a gas station and a roadside fruit and produce stand, selling mostly pecans to the passing travelers. This business was successful until I-75 was built and most of the traffic shifted away from Highway 41. Shortly after the couple celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1972, Eddie Ray Jefferson passed away in February 1974. His lifelong companion, Johnny Dell Marshall Jefferson, continued to live until July 1991. They are both buried at the Riverview Memorial Gardens in Valdosta, Georgia. With the passing of Eddie Ray and Johnny Dell, the Ray family collection of Civil War letters, documents, and photographs were passed on to their daughter, Faye Jefferson Young, who was raising her children, Susan, Samuel, and Stephen, in Savannah, Georgia. Faye passed away in May of 2022, and with her passing, these precious keepsakes made their way into that little brown box for another generation to preserve. How fortunate that this historical legacy has continued on after the short life of Private Franklin Ray, from one generation to the next for 160 years. Fortunate that it was cherished by the family of Faye Jefferson Young and her children, Susan, Samuel, and Stephen Young. How proud we are that they now entrust its care to the Berrien Historical Museum and Archive to preserve and continue to share this saga of Private Franklin Ray, Confederate soldier.